Before we talk about last week's games and this week's games, we just want to play a clip from Donegal Callahan, who joined us during the week on Wednesday Night Rugby, and he got some interesting stuff to say about the level of contact that's happening in the Premiership at the minute. Have a listen.
Maybe it's me kind of being older within the game that I think maybe that, I'm getting old, so this hurts more. But I'll be honest with you, guys are really well conditioned now. They're so much bigger. Guys are so much bigger. My teammates, we've 147 kg props with really low body fat. They're just massive men. But I'm not too sure of all those stats, but I can just give you our working week this week. We put out 23 guys against Brive, and 17 of them had to report injury clinic on Sunday morning and weren't fit to train on Monday morning. So out of our 23 guys, 17 of them needed some form of treatment or were nursing an injury after a game. And like Woody will tell you there, if you're trying to plan for the following week and you miss a day, or you're trying to get your squad up and going, it's a massive distraction. But it's kind of got to the point where you can't moan or groan about it, because every club is in the exact same position. There's nothing different in the Premiership. You chat to any of the other coaches, they're all in the same boat. The physicality is through the roof. The athletes are phenomenal now. But one thing for me, and I think it's where probably the players' unions need to step up and control the contact of training, because I suppose we can all live with an injury in games, but I just think the contact level at training is really high, really severe, in tight drills that maybe you could have done for a few minutes a few years ago and got away with it when guys were smaller. But when you've big, strong men, it's getting very, very hard. So, it's a concern. It really is. I think, I'll be honest, it's gone to the point nearly every game you come off and you're okay, you're thankful,
This is crazy, right?
17 is a lot. I've never heard of that before. You have bad days. You have days where you pick up more than your fair share, but the vast majority of your team, your squad, that goes out and plays, not reporting for training on a Monday. That I'm hoping that's unusual for them, but it sounds as though it's not. Yeah,
and it sounds like they've released a lot of stats this year. The number of tackles per game is up nearly 70, from 205 to 273. The ball is in play an extra 6.5 minutes roughly, and the number of rucks has gone from 145 to 189 in a 5-year period in the Premiership. Is this just the Premiership, or is all rugby actually like that?
No, I think all. Obviously, we've only had one weekend of Europe, so we won't get proper stats until 2, 3, probably 4 games. But because of these new laws, all of those stats have changed. All of them have increased. Ball and play, because there's more phases, because you can't compete at the ruck like you used to, because of the tweaking of the rules, not enabling the tackler to be the first man to steal the ball, having to come back through the gate, and that has had a huge bearing on more rucks, coming into effect in the game, because you just, there's no point in wasting energy and spinning yourself around and having a go and then getting bashed. Yeah. You've really got to pick your moment.
So, is there a fix to this?
I don't know.
Teams are committing less to the ruck as well, aren't they? So there's more guys in the defensive line, which means the ball carriers often being hit by 2 guys, which again increases the likelihood of you picking up some kind of an impact injury. That one feeds the next, and the next phase feeds the next phase, and it all adds up.
One thing I'm very surprised hearing is that they are doing contact at training.
Well, Joe was amazed. He was talking to the lads on Wednesday Night Rugby. He'd assumed that it just didn't happen anymore.
It didn't. It didn't really back. The last 4 or 5 years of my playing days. It was all about body position and make sure you're in a position to make the impact. You did of course you did some in pre-season. You get the body hardened, get ready for impacts. But when you start playing games, and particularly depends on the age profile of your team or certain individuals. Some guys didn't train Mondays and Tuesdays, and they obviously were the contact sessions.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why you're getting enough of it every Saturday. Why can you not simulate what you're doing? Make sure you can. There's enough video analysis now to be able to look back and see body positions of being able to enact a tackle rather than having to follow through with it.
So how much actual contact is there in training generally over the last couple of years? Like literally none.
Hardly anything. Maybe like if it goes defensive coach by defensive coach, and I remember going back to Phil Larder back in 2001 on that Lions tour, we were tackling non-stop at training. It was all about tackle technique and all about gaining impacts. But in the end, he was phased out because England were doing full bore tackling sessions on a Thursday before an international, and then guys were picking up injuries. And this is 6-7 years into professionalism. Like, someone would laugh at a defensive coach if they offered that as an option now. So that has all been phased back and pared back, and it's about doing a very, very small amount. Even Michael Cheika, the late 2000s, we did a small bit of it at the very start of a Tuesday session, and then it was like, phew, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Okay, no injuries. Right, now we're fine. Yeah. We've got that done. Squared off. You've got it. And Joe Schmidt would have always been about in the mind gym, you've got to focus and think about what you're doing rather than always acting it out.
Yeah. Were there concussions in training?
Here and there, but do you know what? They're probably not reported to the same degree as.
Why would you
Yeah. It's like, I want to rule myself out of the weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, not reported by the players, or not reported by the
players first of all,
coaching staff and the managerial staff when it comes to feeding into the overall picture of concussion stats.
You have to remember too. So there's no, there's there might be a camera at training. There might be a couple of angles, depends on what club you are.
Yeah.
And they're not. It's not as evident in a training environment that someone might have picked up a knock.
Yeah.
I think it's probably not perceived as serious because it's not game intensity and because of the scrutiny.
Yeah,
that's the reality of it. But
a kick in the head,
I'm sure. Yeah, of course. If there's contact, you're going to have some form of concussion. But definitely, my experience of it was there were far fewer concussions in training than there were in games.
Yeah,
and that was at a time too when there weren't that many concussions in games too.
No, they didn't exist until about 5 years ago. One final point on this: the NFL and the collective bargaining agreement prevents full contact sessions right up for most of the pre-season. There's now 2 sessions with pads, and one of those sessions is full contact, and that's it. That's all I have before the season starts. And if you in any way cheat that, you lose a draft pick, because the players have the agents, so the union has a representative who just goes, we did a second contact session today, it gets reported. The Ravens last year lost a draft pick for it, and everybody goes, yeah, fair enough, they're the rules. Is there any point in rugby where the players union gets to a point and says there will be no contact except on match day, and it's our livelihoods you're risking? Is there that move somewhere along the way that stops the Worcesters of the world from having contact in the middle of the week?
Not yet, I don't think. Not yet. Maybe in time, but I don't think we're there yet.
Well, if you're coming from a background where contact and training wasn't really an issue at all, well, then maybe there is no need for it in some circumstances. But this is why you're wondering, is the Worcester situation an outlier, or is it very similar to what's happening across a whole host of French and English clubs?
I do think as well, the older you get as an individual, the more you can take yourself out of those situations. It tends to be for younger players. If you are an experienced player and you're still a regular within the team, you can do a Rocky Elsom and say, no, I don't really do contact. He never trained before a Thursday, but yet he turned it on every Saturday, so it didn't matter.
Yeah.
So you're able to pick and choose an awful lot more, but it does become about a pressurised situation for guys that are on the cusp or on the fringe where they can't choose to do something or not. I'm also shocked at hearing that level of contact, and yet, from Donegal, and yet they're talking about extending the Premiership by another month.
It's crazy,
it's
isn't it?
What?
Yeah.
But
that is
they're not
nuts.
adding games, though, are they?
Yeah.
Well, so it's not just extending the calendar.
No, they're not. They're not adding games. They're just looking at
the
not
Premiership
doubling.
Rugby would make the point that, well, we're spreading the season out, so thereby giving players more time for recovery during the season.
But on Jer's point, you'll still potentially, definitely in weeks that you don't have a game, because it's
full
an interesting
contact today,
game.
lads.
Listen, we can't forget what it's like to be rugby players, so we got to go full bore. So it
obviously gives you less time to build your body up in pre-season and strength and conditioning as well.
Yeah,
there is there's a school of thought, which I don't know has been fully verified scientifically, that some of the injuries in the NFL are being caused by the fact that the players' bodies aren't toughened up by the fact that they haven't had the contact session. I'd like to see the sports science on it myself, but it has been put forward as a view. Is there a view that you need these contact sessions to feel like your body will be protected when ultimately you do get the hits in the match?
Can you get soft by a lack of contact?
You can. Like when you come back from pre-season, you come back from holidays and someone stands on your toe, it's like it's the most excruciating thing in the world. Whereas you get clattered, in the middle of a season and you get up and go for more. So the body does need a period of time to harden up. But that comes with, that's just not about getting collisions. That's about hardening it in the gym and doing all the work and getting fitter. And that's a byproduct of just working hard.
Yeah, so you can cheat that.
So you can. But I do think you need to marry in a little bit of contact. So if you can't, it would be unthinkable to go into
a season
with no contact. I think that would also be dangerous because the body does need some form of hardening.
Yeah, maybe finding some kind of level where the science is accepted by everybody. Maybe that's a bit away. We should talk about the games themselves. We'll start with Leinster. They're our first game this weekend. We have them live. They're at Glasgow. These are big games really because this is the pool of death, and anybody who can get something away from home is going to feel pretty good about life. Leinster didn't prevent their opponents last week from getting something at home, so it was a win, but it was a win with a little asterisks.
Yeah, it was, and it could easily have been a draw. Like Montpellier were pushing hard. Nagusa butchered, that obvious 2-on-1 if you'd thrown it out to Nadolo, and that's potentially another score, and they could have been right back in the mix. So, yeah, do you know what? Montpellier will come away from that game with mixed feelings themselves. They obviously will be delighted that they got a losing bonus. Leinster will be delighted that they got their 5-pointer, but it is vital that you get something out of those games. And Glasgow not getting anything in Exeter, being denied it by that very late try, will really hurt them. And I think those 1-pointers in this group are going to be the difference. Yeah.
Leinster's performance was really good in parts, and then was a little bit kind of what you might expect from a team that was shorn of so much experience. It looked to me like not that they panicked, but they just didn't have that. We've been at this for 10, 15 years. We know exactly how to squeeze the game. When they had the upper hand for a period there in the second half, it looked like they were going to just coast, and they didn't.
You take voices like Rob Kearney, who's a senior player now. You take Sean O'Brien, who's a massive voice. You take Johnny Sexton, who's the heartbeat of the team. You take Jamie Heaslip out of that, and then you take Issa Nasiwa out of that side after 25 minutes. That's a very quiet team, and there's one or two guys still willing to step up and speak up, but I would imagine it must have been pretty quiet. New leaders are beginning to emerge, the likes of Luke McGrath and that, but you've two very separate teams from that one that started and one that is your full strength. And any team, with respect to Ross Byrne, he's going to be a nice player. He's done some really good things while he's been in the 10 jersey, but it's chalk and cheese with Johnny Sexton. Johnny Sexton, when you see him in that Leinster team, gives you proper hope that he can pull it along, even when they're having a terrible day.
Yeah, that
he can pull it along almost single-handedly. He just pulls the strings at the right time, and I think when you see him back in the team, I think it's completely different offering.
Not a bad performance then from a group that is shorn of those leaders, and that must be these are the experiences that they have to go through and come through.
And they got 4 tries and they scored 24 points. You get, when you look at a result and you see 24 points, you think there's no way there's 4 tries in that. So it's the one occasion you're thankful for dodgy place kicking, or misconversions. So the fact that they hung in there and they scored it, and the manner in which they did as well, it was some pretty dodgy defending by Nagusa as well, for an experienced winger.
They're not going to get that this weekend.
No, they won't.
Glasgow.
But yeah, it was a brilliant finish by Barry Daly, in fairness to him, and he's a guy that's really taken his opportunity, and
because he's been referred to as part of this group of kids, but he's 25, I think.
He was rejected by the academy pretty much. He was there when he was 19, kind of said, "Do you know what? We don't see a future for you here." And he was playing AIL and for UCD over the last few years, and he's just thinking he's in dream world now.
But you're going to get them. Everyone talks about the people that fall through the cracks. There's an assembly line of young kids coming through that Leinster Academy now, and it's so hard to find yourself coming out of Irish schools or Leinster schools and get one of those 5 or 6 places in the academy. It's not like when we were starting out in 98, 99 and the IRFU Foundation or IRFU Academy. If you played any form of representative, in you go, there's an academy contract. very, very different now. And you look at the sub-academy players that are now playing for Leinster, the likes of Conan, the likes of Luke McGrath. Those guys weren't immediate academy members. They had to come through via the sub-academy.
Right, and that's actually the power of the province at the moment, is making sure that those players do get hoovered up and eventually make it and provide a role and play a role in these big games.
Yeah, and they are absolutely doing that. I think the academy system is in full flourish, definitely in Leinster. I think it's
I think 13 at the start and 15 at the weekend were spent some time in the academy in their careers.
Yeah, so which is
from the very start to the end, obviously. But watching the Glasgow Exeter game, 3 of Exeter's tries were scored with pick and jams from within 2 metres. Are Glasgow particularly susceptible for that, or are Exeter especially good from that kind of an area? And I just wonder what relevance that has to this weekend's game. If Leinster got those kind of guys that can, as you did so many times when you're playing for Ireland, like burrowing over from a yard.
Not like Exeter. They are. I've watched a lot of them.
They're especially good at it.
They are unstoppable. I was talking. We were in the studio on Sunday with BT, and Nick Easter was our guest, and I was talking to him as a defensive coach. I said, "What do you do when you're coming up against Exeter at the weekend? Do you modify your defence, or how do you beat that?" Because I don't know what percentage of their tries, but it must be up 25-30% of their tries are from pick and jam 5 metres out, and they're not a team that pick and jams from 15 or 20. They just do it when they get close to the line, and their technique is, they have it so down that eventually the numbers just tell, and they wear down the opposition. And Simmons, Waldrum scored like 8 a couple of seasons ago from playing for number 8 for them.
How do you get good at that? Like, how do you decide as a group, this is our hallmark?
I don't know. I think it's obviously something that the coach is big on and feels as though it's easier to just hammer away at a team sometimes.
Yeah.
If you find a skill that you're very good at, if you get your technique, if you get your ruck clear out very effective, pulling in those guards, they know all the tricks of the trade, and they actually are unstoppable at times. They've beaten so many sides. They beat Saracens in the Premiership final. Actually, there was a driving maul, but semi-final last year. But they've just beaten so many sides by doing this, and they're going to do it. But can you defend against it? And I think what Nick Easter said was, it's the latch. It's the guy that latches on. The way Standard did with Kilcoyne at the weekend for his try, you've got to tackle him as well as tackle the player. Yeah. So it's a 2-man tackle. One guy tackles the ball carrier, and the other guy tackles the guy that's latching on.
Because the latch actually drives you through.
Because the latch is the momentum.
Yeah.
So if you hit
how
both,
do you have that level of awareness in that moment? So the guy to your right is the tackler, which means you need to be the latch tackler, and you've got half a second to figure this out and execute it.
Well, if you don't, it's a score. So
it sounds impossible.
It's not easy, and that's why so many sides have had so much difficulty. That's why Exeter score so many, because they're so good at it. But sides will practice that way more against when they're defending against Exeter. I don't know if Montpellier will bother their backside because they just do their own thing.
Yeah.
But you could be sure that Glasgow, when they were facing them last week, knew that it was one of their offensive weapons, but they were perilous to it.
Are Leinster going to regret that point to Montpellier when Montpellier have the 8, 9, 10 access that we all expected to have when they don't have a kid playing 10 for them? Maybe.
I thought one of the Sunday papers got it bang on. I thought they played a bit Neanderthal in their style. They really missed Cruden. They missed a thinker.
Yeah.
Of someone being able to just pick things a little bit better. It was all about blunt force up front. Bang! We're gonna get over the advantage line and get the ball out to Nadolo. That's not a bad idea at times, because he scored a couple of tries.
Picking up 4 points on them is still good. Like, winning 5-1 is still better than 4-0, because you're picking up points on Glasgow and Exeter as well. You don't just have to worry about Montpellier. So scoring 3 tries and keeping Montpellier beyond 7 points, it's the same thing, but it probably feels a bit better if you get your own tries.
Absolutely. And you have to think first and foremost about maximising your number, not about minimalising the others.
And you would hope that Leinster will have a stronger, with Sexton and O'Brien back as well. Are Leinster in rude enough health at the moment to go to Glasgow and win?
I think so. I think what does help is the regularity of which they go to Glasgow and play them in the Pro 14. I think where teams become unstuck in Glasgow, English and French sides, they go there and they go, oh, we didn't realise Glasgow are pretty good sides at home. I was like, well, they won 9% of their games in the
Yeah.
last 4
Munster,
years
Scarlets,
there,
Ospreys, Ulster, they all won there last season. And the prospect of picking up the away win they're probably going to need in this pool to get out of it, you would think this is the game.
This is the one.
Sandy Park,
This is the
Montpellier.
one. This is
Although,
the
in
one.
fairness, looking at the schedule, you would hope that there's some damage done to Montpellier by the time we get to January, and maybe it's not as daunting a prospect, and they're not as interested as they might be if it was next week. But when you look at it on paper, you're thinking Scotsdown, albeit incredibly difficult to go there, is probably the more likely of the three.
Totally agree, and I do think that it'll be one away win will be enough. You win your home games, which again on conversely, Glasgow coming to the RDS won't be afraid of that fixture.
Yeah.
And Exeter, as much as they're very difficult to beat in Sandy Park, they're difficult on the road, so they're no walkovers. But you would hope that from Leinster perspective that they will win their home games. I think this is the one away win, and then you look at try and pick up a point in Sandy Park. That for me, if you win those four and
puts you in 22, 23 territory.
Yeah,
you're sorted
I think that's
then.
enough. Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. That game is live here on Off the Ball tomorrow. Dave is on commentary duty alongside Johnny Murphy and Andy Dunn. We're going to take a quick break. Brian, staying with us. The other game tomorrow is at Thomond Park, and this is a Munster side who drew last week, and again, one of those situations where they're kind of happy and they're kind of like, did we blow an opportunity to get a really important win in the group?
In most facets, they were better than a draw, but that certain penalty that Robin Copeland gave away in the last few minutes and how they got away with it, they have to be happy on the balance of things with a draw to get 2 points out of that. Like, I don't know how the referee came to that decision.
Well, TMO came to it. It went upstairs. You would think as soon as I saw the referee going upstairs, I would think, well, that's it. This is a game-winning penalty. And then for them to have a look at the review and still come back.
And what did he say?
He said it was a Copeland knock-on. It was knocked on by Robin Copeland, but he clearly had to break at least 2 laws to put himself in a position to knock it on. Like, it was Neil Back, Peter Stringer stuff, only it wasn't a scrum. It was more of a ruck, but still. I
did that once in the Lions in 2001, George Gregan, and I couldn't help myself. It was, he's right there, and I'd missed a tackle. I'll write that wrong, and I'll just slap it out of his hand. We went in at half-time. He missed the penalty. I went in at half-time, and Graham Henry went through me. He was like, what are you thinking? Even if it was 22 years of age. So everyone knows that law. That's law it's one of the few laws that has never changed. You cannot slap the ball out of a scrum half's hand while it's still technically in the ruck.
It was one of a number of moments, Brian, that I want to ask you about in that game, because you had that one, you had the penalty that Dave Kilcoyne conceded in the last 10 minutes that they kicked. Then you had the pass from Chris Farrell that was intercepted for the try. When you're down to 14 men, Murray's in the bin, you've got this gale force wind at your back in the second half. It was just a pass that he did not need to throw. And you'd look at those kind of moments in isolation and you just wonder, where were their heads at in this game? They didn't seem to be able to manage specific portions of the game as they unfolded.
And I think that's probably where Erasmus's frustrations lay.
Because he was really frustrated.
Yeah, he was.
He was as prickly with me after the game that he's ever been. And I've done an awful lot of interviews with him, but he just looked like he was not a happy man.
They're quite unlike Munster type errors. They tend to consolidate when they do go a man down. I think they're one of the better sides of doing it. You saw with Pete O'Mahony tying his shoelaces against Leinster a couple of weeks ago.
Both of them.
And just exactly, I was like, I replayed and tried to look back to see if he was undoing them himself in the ruck, and almost certainly had to have been. So they tend to be very good at that, but I don't know. That missed pass was not
just no need for it.
Not clever.
Just keep the ball.
You don't play any way
it was a skip
elaborate
drifting.
Or you just particularly. Into a breeze, you hammer it up and you try and pass that 10 minutes, and by conceding a minimum of 3 points, and then you get on with it and just get one of your most important players back as well. Your 9 is your most difficult player to lose, bar none. More important than your 10, because someone else can go in and fill out a role at 10. You can have a 12 go in there.
Yeah.
You can have Scannell go in and boss things if you lose your 10. If you lose Keatley or Bladenthal.
And they essentially lost their 9 and their 10, because
yeah.
Blendall, normally it might be a winger, or the odd time it might be a centre that will go in and play scrum half. Blendall wanted to play scrum half, so they've lost their entire half backs.
Yeah. So you are better off, I think, trying to get a winger going in and playing that, and you just play tight around the ruck. You're not trying to trying to get any width because you're a number down. It means you have to get extra numbers out wide. So just play it super simple, switches back inside, pick and jams, and lots of shoelace tying.
Didn't make any sense that pass, but they recovered from that quite well. So, like again, like the Leinster performance, bits of absolute brilliance, and then bits where you're kind of going, ugh. So, progress from Munster's perspective from the previous week, when maybe they lacked a bit of intensity, to quote Reggie.
Progress. In parts because I think they showed some really positive things, just not consistently. I think probably by their standards, too many unforced errors, but you did see typical Munster. You saw their scramble. You saw them working super hard for one another. Earls getting and Murray, getting the winger in the corner when it looked, a shoe-in try. Those small moments are the differences between most sides and Munster, and they work so hard for one another. Do you know what that is? And that's to that Reggie point. It's they pride themselves on being the hardest working team, and that they never leave anything behind. It doesn't take any talent to have a hard work ethic, and that is definitely their philosophy. And then you add the talent on top of it.
Ultimately, when we get to the end of January, that game last Sunday is going to seem an awful long time ago. And it doesn't, as you say, when you're playing golf, there's no pictures on a scorecard. Those 2 points could be what gets Munster out of this pool, and no one's going to remember the mistakes they made in Castres.
The only difficulty is that there's 2 French teams in this group, and so one of them will have decided that this is meaningless probably by the end of next week.
Probably Castres.
Definitely
from
Castres.
Munster's point of view, that's not a good thing.
Exactly. That's the one kind of caveat to that, because normally you would say an away draw in Europe is absolutely fantastic. Ronan O'Gara is free to take his place on the sideline this week after a 10-week ban will only be applied to domestic rugby. So obviously his swearing in French is right up there at the top level where it needs to be.
15k as well, is that right?
Yeah.
I heard it on the news and I couldn't get my phone out quick enough to text and see who paid that.
Lauren LeBeat got a 15-week suspension, so obviously there was a pair of them in it. They were tag teaming the poor touch judge / referee.
15 is substantial enough. You have to think there was
fair
few expletives in there.
I haven't seen enough of wrestling this year to know exactly how well or otherwise they're going or what we can expect from this game.
I haven't seen a massive amount of them. I've seen highlights, and again, very, very French, decent at home, can be pretty terrible on the road. Although they've had a couple of near losses on the road to Claremont and someone else, so at least they've had a decent showing. Different team with Carter in it, but you just sense that coming back to Munster in Thomond Park this weekend, I don't see anything other than 5 points from Munster.
Nakarawa's performance at the weekend was crazy. Like, you've got this 6'6" second row forward who just loves offloading the ball more than any other three-quarter we've ever seen play the game. It must be incredibly frustrating and incredibly enjoyable to play with someone like him in equal measure.
So I saw that Ronan O'Gara interview afterwards where they were asked, he was asked, do you have to try and curtail that, or how do you get the most out of a player like Nakawara? And he says you just have to let him do his thing. He's going to make errors, but he's going to create some magic moments, as he did for the Leroux try, and he got one himself. 10 of 18 offloads were from one player. Like 10 in any game is probably three times more than the top scorer in most offloader in most games.
Most second rows
3-4 is
have
a lot.
10 offloads in their career.
Yeah.
Let alone 10 offloads in a game.
Yeah, he's very exciting, but it's also it's the lateness in which some of them are coming, and there's a contentious issue as to when are you on the ground and how long do you have. Like he's on the ground, and the next thing the ball comes shooting back from nowhere, and you think, what?
He still had it under control.
Is that the loss? Doesn't matter.
So 5 points. There's a minute's applause, obviously, for Anthony Foley at the start of the game as well. Like, this is a game that they have the opportunity to dominate and play to their strengths and just get back on track.
Yeah, it is. I saw Peter O'Mahony today in the Irish Times saying that Racing mulled all but one of their lineouts. That's a lot, so they know what way they're going to come at them. But this is a great opportunity for Munster to properly get their teeth into Europe. Obviously, a year after Axel's passing. Again, it'll be high emotions. He talks about constantly referring to Axel in everything that they do. So expect a fully charged performance again. And Munster and Europe are just a match made in heaven. They just love one another, and they always produce their best for it. And just when you have a couple of question marks about them, they produce the enormous performances that quieten the media and quieten the public that have doubted them.
They were meeting with the new head coach this week, I think, for the very first time. And it's interesting, Dave, talking about Razzie being prickly after the game. There's been no sense of him disengaging from this job whatsoever. It's like it would have been very natural for the rest of the world to go, well, he's just going to put his time in there, but he hasn't. It's
obviously strange that it's happening mid-season. When you know a coach is leaving, you still have something to play for towards the end, whereas he's going to be going halfway through, and then you've got to impress someone else. But as I mentioned before, I'm sure Van Gran has looked at many Munster games since he's come on board, and he knows his personnel prior to even coming and meeting them this week. Yeah. All good coaches. He's also a workaholic. From what I've heard, so the fact that he's done that, you could be sure he knows his players. When he's shaking hands, he's going to know who he's talking to, and he'll have a fair idea what side he's inheriting and what the good traits and the work-ons are coming his way. We were talking a little bit earlier before we came on, and we were talking about the injury issue. He was making the point that there aren't that many injury crises in Irish rugby the way there are traditionally that we've seen in the Premiership this season. Ulster are pretty close this season. They've had a raft of injuries. They're at La Rochelle on Sunday at 4:15. Best and Payne look likely to miss this game through injury as well. They did exactly what they needed to do against Wasps. Not particularly impressive in doing it, but a win is a win, particularly in the first round for Ulster. Yeah, there hasn't been vintage Ulster yet. They're waiting on that 80-minute performance. They've done enough to get the job done in all but bar one of their games. They obviously had that slip up to Zebre, but when you have 6 wins at the start of the season, there's no reason to be particularly downbeat. Yeah. And they are going to one of the more challenging places to play these days. La Rochelle have shown they're not a one-season wonder from last year, topping the end of season top 14 prior to being knocked out by Toulon in the semi-final. So
I'd be very worried by how they played at the Stoop at the weekend. Like, you wonder what the French teams, in particular La Rochelle, who don't have any European pedigree, how will they take to this competition? And they just smashed Gwent. So they're already...
They were so clinical. Do you know what they were? They were so clinical with their chances. They didn't create a million, but they converted so many.
Yeah, well, all the stats were against them.
Yeah,
territory, possession, set piece, discipline, all the stats on attack and defence. But as you said, they pretty much scored every time they had a chance.
They seem they're a bit like the Exeter of top 14. They have this, it's a real community feel.
Yeah.
Was I reading that they have somewhere near 800 sponsors.
Right.
So everyone, pays their way towards being able to pull in big names, but not superstars. Victor Vito, Jason Eaton, Ryan Lamb is bossing things for them at 10, and he's had more clubs than hot dinners. He's jumped around the Premiership to 5 or 6 different clubs. So he's obviously fitting in really well, whatever dynamic they have going on, and you just sense that that was their first outing, as you said, Dave, in Europe, and it was a walk in the park. It was a breeze to them, and now they're at home.
Yeah. So from Ulster's perspective, again, it's a way. Are they happy with a point from this game?
I think you're happy. I think you're happy with a point, but the way to go and get a point is thinking, let's get a point.
Yeah.
You got to go and get after it. And just, do you know what Ulster need to do? They just need to look at a more consistent performance. The first half against Wasps was a bit of a chess match, and they were kind of working each other out. The conditions weren't great. But then they had those 2 moments of genius, one from Charles Piatow and a great finish from Stockdale, and then a breaking ball and a bit of interplay again between the two, and that pass back into McCluskey. And that was in a 3-minute window where they were 6 points behind at the start of it, and then bang, all the momentum's with them, and I was sure that they were going to kick on and get the bonus point.
Yeah.
But Wasp managed to hang in there and almost got something from the game.
Do we start at some point around now to see the impact of the change in the coaching tickets in Ulster and start to think, okay, you begin to see an evolution from last season? Because obviously they beefed up the coaching ticket quite significantly, and it's not you shouldn't be able to point to something on day one and go, okay, that's clearly they've changed things radically. Like, it's around 2 months, 3 months into the season, you start to go, okay, this is improving.
Yeah, it is improving. I think they probably have been frustrated themselves that they haven't had a buster performance, a huge Saracens-esque performance, because they've had so many wins. But the opposition they've had haven't been brilliant. But you can only beat who's in front of you. That's the reality of it. And
unless they're Italian.
But it's a tricky one, because you want them to be better than they are, but they're doing enough to get by.
Yeah.
And until they stop doing that, you can't really get on their backs.
They had ridiculous travel issues to that Zebre game, which they don't want to make excuses about, but then you start hearing and listening to them, I was like, holy shit, that doesn't sound like much fun.
Zebre were really good that game, like I've never seen before, and maybe not so good that you expect them to go and win the game, but they played like I've never seen an Italian team play. So credit to them for that. And once they got in front, Ulster couldn't get back into the game. But yeah, it's not a nice stat to have that your one loss is to the worst Italian team in the Pro 14.
Connacht obviously are getting a bit of confidence from these games. That's kind of what they need from these back-to-back European games at the minute, to come back into the Pro 14 and go, hang on a second, calm down everybody, it's grand.
Yeah, you just need to start winning again. They went on a bad run, and we saw the frustrations of their head coach
Kieran Keane.
In that interview with Graham Simmons, and then the week after they had another tough loss to Ulster, having played considerably better. So they just need to get back and remind themselves that we're a decent side, we've got good players, and we will be able to Challenge Cup aside, it is an opportunity to get back into the tournament, into the Champions Cup next year if you win it. But more importantly, we need to remind ourselves how good we can be when we go to Pro 14 to get one of those top 3 places, because they need to find themselves. They got a taste for Champions Cup, and now they want to get back into it, I'm sure. Yeah,
and really important for Irish rugby that they're there as well. One last thing, Robbie Henshaw, the most giftable Irish rugby player of his generation, getting knocked over, getting back up, winning the ball all in one move. Nice little 4-second clip on the internet. Boom. Happy days.
Yeah, that's one for the show reel. It was
he
beautiful.
Smiling between the first and the second tackles? I just thought...
I think that's called a grimace.
I thought it was a smirk. I thought in between being demolished and hitting the deck, he had time to have a little smile at the fact that he'd just been steamrolled, then got back to his feet and threw himself at his ankles.
Whatever about the second part of it, but to be knocked over by Ndolo, and then while your momentum is pushing you backwards, still fire yourself and get the technique to be able to clip him around the ankles, and use that to swivel around into the through the gate position that you have to be as the tackler. That was incredible. And then the caveat was to obviously steal the ball and have the perfect timing to get it off Pienaar as he was playing the ball, and then I'll just rip that too. So, and you saw from Pienaar's reaction, it wasn't even like he's offside. It was like, oh gosh, how did that happen?
It was ridiculous, right?
It was class. It was a brilliant piece of play.
Is there any danger that he's like too throwing himself into all this stuff that he's going to get injured? You just like, here, hang on, calm down. There's a whole season to go here, Robbie.
He's going to be
Keep
that.
This for the Six Nations.
He's going to be that player all his career, because he's an all or nothing player. He throws it about and he backs himself, and I think that's one of his strong qualities.
Back at 13, do you like him there?
Yeah, he was good there. I think that's where there's a good chance he's going to be playing. With Jared Payne, not featuring thus far, you have to imagine he's not going to be in the mix. So I think
Ringrose a bit away as well.
Yeah, Ringrose is a while away, so you have to think that he's there, and probably one of the Ulster boys, or Bundy
at 12,
or Bundy at 12. Yeah, absolutely.
Is Bundy ready to go for November?
I think, he's good to go. Yeah,
okay, right.
So we could give him first
available
cap,
for
first
selection.
up, South Africa.
All right, good stuff, Brian. Thanks very much. We'll
Cheers.
talk about that a bit more closer to the